So thank you everybody for joining us today. My name is Priscilla. I am the digital content strategist here at We All Grow and ASE. And today we're having a series of Amigahood action community circles where we're trying to just be provide as many resources as we can given the current climate that's kind of affecting our community. And today we have Claudia Farfan joining us, and she is an immigration attorney who will answer any of the questions that we have, whether we've been affected, our family has been affected by the current ICE raids that have been not kind of, but have been deliberately attacking our community. Or if we are out protesting, if we are afraid of, me being detained, whatever it may be. Claudia is here to answer any questions. Attorney Claudia Yesenia Farfan obtained her Women's Studies Bachelor of Arts degree from Cal State LA. She then received her Juris Doctorate degree from William Mitchell College of Law in St. Paul, Minnesota. And in December 2020, she was sworn as an attorney for the state of California. And prior to becoming an attorney, Attorney Farfan gained invaluable experience as a immigration student attorney. Other legal experience includes her participation as a law clerk for the city of Minneapolis, where she consulted on the library ethics code. She also has worked as a law clerk for William Mitchell Family Law Clinic and the Los Angeles Public Defender's Office. And Attorney Farfan believes every client deserves individual attention and the best representation possible. She maintains an ethical understanding of the law while prioritizing the client's individual needs. And Attorney Farfan's interests include family, soccer, traveling. She loves animals and standing up for human rights. And we're so happy to have you here today.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it, giving me the opportunity to help spread the knowledge because it's very important right now.
No, definitely. Just to start off, a few questions that I have personally. Um, Number one, as I mentioned earlier, I have family who has come here through humanitarian parole. And so if somebody has come through humanitarian parole, granted by the US, what options do they have now? Is there a possibility for them to appeal the case with a lawyer, or is everybody mandated to leave right now?
Okay. So, first, parole is like an umbrella term. There's different types of parole. The program where they let people from specific countries come in, that one was a special program that President Biden started. And basically, it allowed people from our countries to reunify with family here. But the law says that that can be revoked. Now, they are supposed to notify the person, whether it's an email, regular mail, some sort of notification. And once the notification is given, you can attempt to say, hey, this is why the revocation shouldn't apply to me. But with this administration, that probably isn't going to help the situation. Now, one of the things you can do is apply for asylum, right? Because a lot of the things that were claimed in order for that parole to be approved is everything that's happening in the country and to them specifically. And so it does have a basis for asylum, and you can apply for asylum, whether it is like within 1 year of arriving, or in this case, because the status is being revoked, there is a change in circumstance, and so that deadline moves. So they can apply for asylum. Now, there's a tricky part with that, because even though they can apply for asylum, they were paroled, which means legally they are standing at the border, right? Even though they're physically inside the United States. And when that happens, if the government decides to give a notice to appear before an immigration judge, they're not going to be eligible for bond. Right. So it's a tough decision, because if you apply and they see that it's because of a parole, they can go back and say, okay, we're gonna just have you go before a judge because technically you're at the border, right? There's arguments that can be made to try and stop that, right? Especially if they're minors. Some circumstances, everybody's case is a little different, so you have to do like an evaluation to see what you can argue in order to keep them with the asylum office and not have them move over with a court. Okay. Now, asylum isn't easy though, right? Asylum is a very difficult application to win. Right now, you're probably looking at Central America. If you apply for asylum, they are maybe approving 3 to 5% of all of the applications, because asylum is very specific and there's two things that are very difficult to prove. So you have to prove that you were somehow harmed or that you would be harmed if you return, right? But that harm has to be connected to one of 5 reasons: your politics, your religion, your nationality, you belong in a particular social group, or your race. And most of us that have experienced something, or our family members who have experienced something in our countries, they don't know why they're being targeted, right? They just are experiencing this. And so it's very difficult to show the connection of the harm with one of these 5 categories. Now, if the person is very active in politics and, they're out there protesting and their faces in the newspaper and the government has sent somebody to beat them up and stuff like that, then it's a little more clear, right, what the issue is. And so there has to be an evaluation on that particular requirement. The other one is, if you're saying it's not because of my politics, it's not because of religion or race or my nationality, it's because I'm part of a particular social group, you have to define what that social group is. It has to be recognizable by people and the government in their particular country, and the government cannot or does not want to protect that group. Right? So you have to legally define it. You have to show that it is an actual group. Then you have to show that you're a part of that group. And then you have to show that the government either doesn't want to protect this group or is the one actually causing the harm. Right? I'll give you an example: victims of domestic violence, right? So victims of domestic violence, we know that that group exists because there are laws. And our countries don't always enforce those laws. And so that's one way of showing a connection of like, hey, the government doesn't want to or can't protect the victims. And so this is why we need to approve the asylum. Now, there are complications in there, right? But that is an option for them. The other option is that a parole is considered a legal entry, right? And so if they are married to a US citizen, they can request an adjustment in the US and ask for a green card, right? Or if a job is offering them to sponsor them for a particular position in that company, a job can also do it. Now there's loopholes and things that you have to kind of look for, but the work one takes longer, and the company has to go through a lot of red tape in order to make it happen. And the person also has to have either experience or the education required for whatever position is being offered. So that one's a little harder, but it is an option. And we have people from our countries that come who are engineers, who are doctors, who are, professionals. And so they might have that possibility as well. Right, the other one, it's a little harder now that all of the paroles have been revoked, but had they gotten enough notice, they could have also changed their status to something else, like a student visa or any other status. But because it's already been revoked, that's very limited. So there are options, but we have to do an individual evaluation to see which one best fits the person. Now, if this person is being detained or this person is, being taken in by ICE, then asylum is your first like way to stop things. And so that would be a recommendation if they do fear returning. And most of them do, because that was the reason why they united with family members here, because of everything that was happening at home. So they should have a basis for it. So it's not a lost cause, but it is a difficult road.
Got it. Yeah, and obviously, I would imagine that um, none of the pathways, especially at this juncture right now with this current administration, nothing's really going to be easy, and it's going to be an uphill battle. But good to know that there's options. So thank you for breaking that down. Um, I know that another thing that a lot of people has worried a lot of people, at least here in LA, and we've seen it already a few times, is citizens getting detained. As we saw in Pico Rivera a few last week with the young man who was detained after his coworker was getting detained. But how can citizens protect themselves from, uh, getting detained? How as a collective can we help avoid it? Because obviously there's people out there recording and making sure that they're documenting this as it goes. But um, I've gone out to protest and my family's like, you know what, if you get arrested, we have bail money. And I'm like, I'm a citizen, like that, why that's not gonna happen to me. But I feel like the rules are a little bit unknown. So how can we, yeah, protect ourselves from being detained?
So there isn't like a magic action or word that we can say to stop being, arrested or being detained. Now, what makes a difference is some of the things we do say, because then those become defenses once we are before a judge or even before a judge. When we're talking to a prosecutor saying, like, hey, this happened. Are you sure you want to take this before a judge, right? Now, one of the tricky things is who is there, right? Is it ICE? Is it, the FBI? Is it the ATF? Is it the marshals? Who is there? And that's very difficult right now to figure out who you're dealing with. But if you're in a position where it is an obvious officer, your best bet is to not resist, right? Because then they're going to try and put, resisting arrest. They have to prove what they were going to arrest you for first, but it's not something that's argued in that moment. It's argued later. And so I think we'll take the Walmart case, for example. I think that the young man was doing the correct thing up until he was like, why are you taking me, right? And like trying to get out of the car. I'm a US citizen. I'm a US citizen. You're not supposed to take me. The thing is that they too can do a citizen's arrest, right? So ICE can still say, I'm arresting you because you're interfering with what I'm supposed to be doing, right? And doing a citizen's arrest, and they are supposed to turn you over to whether it's a federal agent who could actually arrest you or a local officer who could actually arrest you, right? So they can detain you, and then they can also argue that, well, I don't know that you were a citizen or not because you don't have documentation in that moment. That's not a valid reason, but in that moment, it is something that they'll use. Or if you do show them, your passport or your passport card, they can easily say, well, I don't know if this is fake or not, so you're still going to have to come with me. So there isn't like anything magical that you can do in the circumstance to stop. Now, it's important to make sure that it is an officer, right? Now, if you are unsure that it's an officer, then somebody calls 911 and somebody has to say, hey, there are people here who are masked. They could be impersonating officers. They don't want to identify themselves. I don't feel safe. Please send sheriff. I'm willing to cooperate with the sheriff, or I'm willing to cooperate with the police. I just don't know who these people are. Right. And if it's in a car, it's actually easier because then you call 911 and you tell the operator, I am going to drive to the nearest police station because I don't know who these people are. And I'm willing to deal with the sheriff. And then once the sheriff verifies if these people are actually officers, then I want my lawyer and I'm not going to sign anything or answer anything, but I am going to cooperate, right? Because then they have no excuse to escalate. And unfortunately, some of them will still escalate, right? Even when we comply and we're doing what we're told, and what ends up happening later is a lawsuit and you end up getting money. It sucks. right? Because it's like this isn't supposed to be happening. They're not supposed to be doing these things, but they are. And so in those moments, safety first, right? You have to use your gut. Is like if there's five of them, you know, physically resisting isn't going to help. If it's one person and you're a citizen and you don't know if they are an officer, you can run, you know. Um, and meanwhile, hopefully somebody's calling 911 or you call 911 if you've got your headphone in, something. Personally, I bought a body cam, right? Because I don't want to be fumbling with my phone trying to record and run. So I am gonna have a cam on me. Your footage can be, if you're wearing one, admitted into court, and so can mine. And so it takes one less thing to worry about, right? Um, on the practical side, the other thing that I'm doing is I have an air tag in my bra. Because you know what? If it is somebody who's not an agent, my family's gonna know where I'm at. They can ping me, whatever it is, we can be found. So there are practical things that we can do, but there isn't anything that I can tell you this will stop what they're doing. Right? There are things you should say. If they are not obvious officers, and you think it might be like a bounty hunter doesn't have to identify themselves, but they have to show you their insurance papers and their bond paper upon request. So if you're telling this person, let me see your badge number, right? And they're not answering, say, okay, if you're not going to show me your badge number and you're a bounty hunter, I want to see your license and your insurance, because then they have to give it to you. Now, if they don't, and then we sue them, they lose their license, they can't do this anymore, they pay you out of the bond. The bond that they have to have is about $1 million. And if enough people, sue them, they're going to be out of business, right? And we need to start bringing these lawsuits faster, because the sooner we bring these lawsuits, we can do discovery and then find out more information and figure out how to deal with this. California has already started by saying, if you're an officer, you can't be masked, right? So will give us at least a little bit
Yeah.
relief.
I
But
saw that Gavin Newsom was talking about that they're trying to put that into a law, or did something yesterday or today about it. So hopefully that happens, because yeah, I mean, how am I supposed to know, like, not to escalate the dread, but what happened to those lawmakers in Minnesota?
Mhm.
That guy was dressed as a police officer. Like, there's
Yes,
people that are dressed as officers, impersonating officers, and obviously that's a huge offense, a federal offense, but they're doing it. And so I'm like, who am I supposed to trust? Like, I no.
and to a certain extent, you can use that, right? If they don't identify themselves, if they don't give you a badge number, then there are defenses in court that you can argue. Self-defense. Yeah, I hit them, but you know what? They didn't identify themselves. They didn't specifically tell me I was under arrest. They didn't say anything. They just looked the part. And with everything going on, I just didn't feel comfortable. And I called 911 and I told them what was happening. And, at, if you feel the need to fight for your life, fight for your life. Like, right? And now, if it's an actual officer, they have identified themselves, they have given you a badge number, that's when I'm saying don't resist. Because there isn't anything. Once that officer has made up their mind that they're going to take you in, there isn't anything that you can say that is going to stop them.
I mean, it sucks that that's the case, but yeah, the way that they're escalating everything is just it's scary. And yeah, for me, I'm like, I would rather just, like, okay, take me in, but also what I've seen is, like, they're not saying where people are going. Like, people will be taken in, and I think with the young man from Walmart, like, they didn't know where he was, like, for a day or two. That happened with another protester in downtown LA. They didn't know where he was. And so it's like how I mean, if the enforcement isn't sharing, like, what do you do when you don't know where your loved ones are?
So there's two routes, right? If you know that it was a marked car, there are channels and we can find them. If it is not a marked car, file a kidnapping report. It was an unmarked car. They didn't identify themselves. They were masked. This is a kidnapping. I'm going to report it. Right? So file a report. Then they have to look for them. Right? The other thing is a habeas corpus. You have to have an idea of where they are a little bit. So if you know that they're a US citizen, right, you can go to a court and say, hey, they need to tell us where this person is. We know it's not with ICE because they're a US citizen. ICE had to have turned them over to any other law enforcement agency, and they're not letting us know. And you can file an emergency habeas corpus, right? Now, it does take 24 hours for all of them to really process the information when they're not inundated. And so 48 hours, it's a lot, but also still a little normal with the circumstances, right? But there are ways, and I'm going to give these to you. I don't know if we want to have this part shared because it's one of those things where we can help people, but quietly, right? We spread it in the community, but we don't let others know that we know. So the way I do it is I wait until after 6 p.m. The night shift is much more willing to share information with us, right? They're tired, they really don't deal with the public as much. And so you get a couple of people who are like, okay, I'll help you. Versus if you call at 7 in the morning and those agents are the ones who are dealing with lawyers every single day and people, they're grouches. I want to use another word, but um, so I usually wait and call at night. And the way I do it is I'll say, hey, this family is really upset. They don't know where he is. They don't know if he was kidnapped. And, we know you're busy. Can you just check, please? And then a lot of the times I'll tell them, it's okay if you're busy, I'll hold. However long it takes, I'll hold. And so calling it at after hours, sometimes it's way better to find somebody. One. Two, with ICE, their ICE locator takes 24 hours, but you can still call different areas, right? So normally, if they're detained in downtown, they're going to go to the federal building in the basement, B18. There's a direct number you can call. A lawyer can go 24/7 there and knock and be like, hey, I'm here. I want to see this person, even if they're not processed yet. There is a list of detention centers for everywhere. But if you know where the person is detained or where they catch them, right, and arrest them or kidnap them, you have a better idea of which office they were taken to. So it's very, very important to know where they were taken from. There is, if it's any federal agency, there is the Board of Prisons will be able to see where they are detained if they took them to a federal criminal facility. The county, the sheriff can also see more than just their agency. Those are the two places I would start. And then the marshals. With the marshals, you need somebody who knows how to talk to authority without being confrontational and at the same time being patient because they're a different breed. But there are numbers that you can call, and I can email those to you so you can share in your group, but there are numbers you can call to look for people. And basically, the line I always use is the family doesn't know where they are and they're debating whether to file a missing persons report. Is there a way you can help me? Here's, they last saw him here. We have some witnesses saying that maybe it was law enforcement. We have other people saying that it could be a kidnapping, and we just want to make sure, like, we know you're doing your job, you know, and a lot of the times the night shift will say, oh, they're right here. And once you know where they are, that's when you can do the habeas corpus. That's when you can push and contact which officer is in charge of the case. You can reach out to the prosecutor's office and be like, hey, here's what happened. And I know you're waiting for your cop to say whatever, but we've got video, and you can actually have the prosecutor, because a lot of the prosecutors, like the Walmart one, it's going to be very difficult to find a prosecutor that's going to be like, yeah, we're going to prosecute him. He didn't take a swing at the officers. He didn't do anything that was flagrant. And so it's going to be difficult. Even if the cops want it, that prosecutor could be somebody you could convince because they look at the evidence a little different. I'm going to write down that I'm going to email you those numbers because if I don't write it down, I forget.
No worries. Thank you so much. No, this is super helpful. We have a question from Josefina. Can you please speak to sheriffs that have 287G agreements? How safe is it to call upon them if we are being targeted up at a demonstration?
So it's a little complex because if you are in the protest and they're already, escalating things, that's not who you want to report things to in that moment, right? But if something's happening at home or something is happening at work or in the street, and it's not related to ICE and it's not related to officers being there, most of them will come and take a report. Most of them will come and help you. So the agreement is we're not going to give ICE information, right? ICE has access to their systems, but they're not gonna call their buddy and be like, here you go. Um, they're also responsible for keeping the safety of the street and crowd control. Um, it is a very delicate relationship, right? Because LAPD and our sheriff, we have a very long history that it's a very tense relationship, to say the least. You can, if you don't feel safe reporting, let's say at LAPD, you can call the sheriff and be like, hey, I know this is so and so's jurisdiction, but I don't feel safe reporting it there because of X, Y, and Z. And if they don't listen, there is a victim's line at the prosecutor's office where you say, hey, I'm a victim of this, but I'm afraid to report it here. And I tried reporting it here, and neither one of them is taking me seriously. So you can do that. You can also skip the beat cop. You can ask for the captain of that station. You can ask, other people. I usually try to find the domestic violence unit because they get their training a little bit different. And so they're used to speaking with victims. Um, it will be a little difficult, right, to get a one-on-one with them, but it's the place to go if nothing else feels safe. Um, it's sad that they have put the community in a position where we have to question that, and so it's not always going to be safe, unfortunately.
Yeah.
It's these are the options that you can do when you don't feel safe.
Yeah, unfortunately, yeah, it I see a cop car and I am just like already my body goes into like a very tense mode. I don't feel safe at all. And even I live in Long Beach and so even one day I saw like a border patrol truck being uh, uh I guess chaperoned by a sheriff car and like immediately everybody would just like went on the street and started recording because we were like, what are they going to do? They weren't even pulling over anybody, but everybody was like already on high alert. And so it's sad that we've kind of been conditioned to that now and just being immediately fight or fight. So thank you for letting us know that. Um, Another question, I think this one might be more important than the other one that I had, but can immigrants be detained and deported without due process? I think that's like a big issue that people are like, everybody deserves due process, but obviously we've been seeing people have been shipped out of the country. So can they be detained and deported without due process?
Like any lawyer will say, it depends. So, there are different categories of cases, right? I'm going to try to generalize it as much as I can. There are people who are in the US that have never had any type of case, whether it's them asking for something or ICE or a court demanding something in order to not physically take them out of the country, right? The majority of these people, if they have been here more than 2 years, have the right to see a judge. Okay. Whether they entered at an assigned port or not. There are going to be issues and things that need to be worked out, but they have a right to have their process before an immigration judge. And as long as they don't sign and they ask for, to speak to an attorney, the majority of those are getting processed and served with a date and time to go before a judge. Okay. There are a few exceptions to that. Crimes, certain crimes will take you out of that category and say, no, you no longer have the right to go before a judge. You now are going to do what's called an expedited removal. So an expedited removal is basically a very quick interview by Border Patrol. It can also be done by an ICE officer where they're making an evaluation, and if certain things are met, they just have to do the paperwork and then they can take you out. So it's not a hearing before a judge, but that interview is a due process, right? By law, they have to at least have that. And they can have an attorney during that time. And if they say certain words, it will take them out of that category and put them back with a judge. Right? And those words are usually, I'm afraid to go back to my country. Or I want to see a judge for a credible fear interview or a credible, reasonable fear interview. So there are certain words that will take them out of that category. But it is very fast and can happen in 5 minutes, especially if the person who is detained has no idea what's happening. Right? Because it's when I say interview, it's very much like, what's your name? Let me run your prints. What's your date of birth? Let me take your pictures, and then based on what they're seeing on the fingerprints, they're making a decision and then saying, sign here. So they're not necessarily being told like, hey, this is to decide whether or not you can be here. And that's where our community, I think, needs that information, right? Because if they say certain words, if they're afraid to go back, then that will take them out of that category. The other thing is that they lie to people, right? There is nothing that says that ICE or any police officer has to tell you the truth. And so a lot of the times when they're in that process, they'll say something like, oh, you don't want to see a judge because, then you're going to be detained for years. And people are like, I don't want to be detained for years. So then they sign. And so it's considered due process because it's almost like a self-deportation. And it happens very nonchalant, very casual. And so it seems like there's no due process. But there is a tiny bit there, right? Now, then there are people who have a deportation order or a removal order. And in the eyes of the government, they've already had their due process because a judge already said, you can't stay here. And so those are the people who time is of the essence, because the minute that they're picked up, especially if they're from Mexico, they can be out of the United States in a few hours. And so these are the people that they do have an arrest warrant for, right? These are the people that they don't have to sign anything and then will still be taken out of the country. They, even if they ask to see a judge, unless they say magic words, they're not going to see a judge. And really, at that point, the only thing you can say is, I want to see a judge for a reasonable fear hearing. And then the judge will see them fairly quickly, ask questions and see if the fear is at the level that it needs to be in order for them to do what's called a withholding hearing. And withholding is very similar to asylum. It's just that the level of evidence is higher. The requirements are the same, it's just you need more evidence. And so that's the one thing that can take you out of there and have you go before a judge. But you are detained while that is happening. Then they won't release you unless it's approved. And even after it's approved, they will do an evaluation. And there are people who have that approved and in detention. So those are the people that it looks like they're not getting any due process because they've already gone through the system. That's not to say that there are officers who are not following the rules. You know, there are rumors that some officers have signed forged signatures saying, oh no, you know, they signed their deportation and that's why they were taken out. And those are the things where it's difficult to help without an attorney. So if the person has a deportation order, or if the person does not remember things very easily when they're nervous, or can't remember how to assert certain rights, those are your most vulnerable. Those are the ones that definitely need an attorney. And you need a plan ahead of time, right? You do the consultation now, you have a plan in place so that if anything happens, that plan goes into motion very quickly instead of they're detained. I got to find an attorney. That attorney has to make the plan, then go downtown, then do this. By that time, especially if they're from Mexico and they have a deportation order, they're out. Okay.
And those deportation orders apply to people who haven't, who also to people who haven't done a criminal offense, correct?
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah. Basically, it's just that they already had the opportunity to present a case before a judge, and the judge said there was not enough evidence to approve the case. And so the case was denied, and either there was no appeal or it's gone through the appeal process. And so there's very few things that'll get you out of that. There are a few cases where you can file motions to reopen the proceedings, but those standards are very high as well. And so these are the things that need to be evaluated beforehand in case anything happens, you're ready to go. But yeah, so I think that there's panic in our community, and so it's very easy to be like, oh my God, there was no due process. In immigration law, there was very little due process to begin with before all of this. And there are some violations that we are seeing where, you know, the people who were deported to El Salvador, there was no notification. And that's, everybody gets at least a notification of, we're going to do this, right? But from the notification to action, that there is nothing that says you have to wait 30 days before you act. It's, we're going to notify you and it happens tomorrow, right? Or we're going to notify you and it happens in a week. And a lot of that is determined by where they want to send you and whether a plane is available or if they're just going to put you in a bus and take you to Mexico. That's what makes the difference as to how fast things move.
I mean, I didn't know that it was that fast, and that's pretty crazy. Wow. So in summary, as long as a judge does see it, and it's already been through the motions, that in itself is the due process.
Yes.
Got it. Okay. Thank you for breaking that down. And also for anybody who has joined in the past few minutes, Claudia is answering any of the questions, so please drop your questions into the chat. We have our own set of questions, and she's already answered a few of the communities, but feel free to drop your questions in the chat for her to answer. So next question, is there a resource? Well, this comes from a question that a friend had told me. Her dad had gone through meeting with attorneys for his wife, and they met with attorneys, and the attorney didn't kind of stall their case, procrastinated, didn't really get the representation that they needed. So how do you know how to vet an attorney or a lawyer that will be there for you, will represent you and your case? What are some tips to finding a good immigration lawyer that you can really trust?
So there's these things called immigration mills. And this is basically big law firms that work on volume, but they don't have enough staff, right? And you'll see a high turnaround with people working there. So it's like, one day you'll have one legal assistant, and then all of a sudden they're like, oh no, now this is your legal assistant. Or first this was your attorney, and now this is your attorney. And so if you see that in the beginning, you at least need to have a conversation of like, what's happening, right? Where is my case? I think there are questions you can ask that the way the attorney answers will give you a hint as to how open they are, right? Um, for example, every attorney has to have a license. For immigration law, that license can be in any of the 50 states, no matter where you're practicing. So one of the questions you can ask is, what state are you barred in, right? Most attorneys aren't going to be offended by that question. It would be like, oh, right here, and here's how you can verify. And if they don't go as far as to say, here's where you verify, every state has a way for you to verify an attorney's license. And then that verification will also tell you if there are complaints against that attorney. And a lot of the times it'll tell you what the complaint is for. So that's one way. The other way is asking questions about the case that create a conversation more than just an attorney looking at it after 15 minutes and saying, yep, I can help you, and it's $5,000. How can you help me? What is this process? How many steps does it have? And the more comfortable they are sharing information, at the very minimum, you know that if there's a concern, you're going to be able to have that communication. Okay. The other thing is asking questions about the contract. For example, I know there are attorneys who say, okay, you're going to hire me for this process. And in this process, 4 consultations with me is what's included. And others say, oh, only 2. Right. And others say, oh, there's no limitation. You just email me, you just call me, and we'll figure it out. And so the level of communication is different. And if you know that you need more communication and this attorney is saying, oh, we're only going to talk twice, that's probably not the attorney for you. Okay. And then there are things we can do besides having the attorney to be proactive in our cases. So they're not the most consistent, but there are ways for you to see in USCIS's website the processing times. Is it the attorney or is it USCIS? For example, a lot of cases need waivers. In the beginning, waivers were taking 6 months, a year, year and a half, and then COVID hit. And since COVID to now, those waivers are taking 4 to 5 years. And so it may feel like your case is stuck and nobody's doing anything, but it really is, we're just waiting for them to give us a decision. So there's ways to double check that, ask, how can I double check their processing time so that I'm not calling you every week? Show me how to do that, right? And the attorney that is open to showing you and guiding you, they're most likely really working on your case. They really care about it. And are willing to have that conversation with you. Not all of them do. There are organizations that also help. You can ask if they're members. Here in LA, it's the Los Angeles County Bar Association Immigration Section. And that community is very close in that we share information with each other. Like we do brain trust with each other and we say, hey, has anybody experienced this? And we actually, before Trump, we would have a really good relationship with USCIS officers where we would meet once a month and be like, here's what we're noticing. How do you want it? And so then we would communicate with each other to kind of help the process move along. Those have stopped since January. So we're kind of in the blind, but ask questions and see how they respond
Yeah.
and look up their license, see if there are any complaints.
Yeah. I mean, just Googling you, I found your record and I was like, okay, then that just told me everything. I'm like, okay, of course Claudia needs to join us today to chat. So I think everybody just doing their due diligence um is just the best thing to do. Um, thank you. Okay, we have a question from Carolina. I work with adolescents. Can you speak to how deportations can happen for teens or children? It's a really good question. Thank you, Carolina.
So the process is the same. There are no real safeguard for children or minors. Okay. There are organizations that will help them, but a lot of the organizations are overwhelmed. If the adolescent is in a process, whether it's foster care or if they've been to juvie, they most likely have had an attorney in the past. And that attorney can be a resource for the child because if they've been in either one of the systems, there is a special juvenile visa, special immigrants juvenile visa for kids who have either been abandoned, neglected, or abused by at least one parent, if not both. And so they have an avenue on getting a green card and staying here. So if you know that they've been in the system, look for that attorney because they've had an attorney either defending them in juvie or in the foster care process. They get their own attorney. The parents get an attorney, the government gets their attorney, and then they get their own. And so you can ask them, do you have an attorney? And then reach out to that attorney. I know LA County has an immigration lawyer in that section where they deal with foster kids specifically for that reason. So that would help. Now, it is a very sad process because how do you explain to a 5, 6, 7, 8-year-old what this whole process is, right? And there was probably, I think when Obama was in presidency, there was a grant where children were getting attorneys, pro bono attorneys, so that they didn't have to represent themselves. And right now, really, it's the judge who has to do the heavy lifting and ask certain questions. And so it's very, very sad. Now, if they are with their parents, it's a little different because the parents become the voice for those children and they don't even have to show up to court. Their presence is waived as long as the parents keep coming, right? Which can also be a catch-22 because if the parent decides, oh, hey, we're just not going to go, then the order of deportation is also for the child. So with children, it's very difficult. Now, if you have adolescents in your life and they're worried about it, I think if the parents are not willing to get an attorney, try the organizations. One is called Kind. It's here in LA. Let me add it to my list of things to email you. There's 3 organizations that will represent them for free, but there is a waiting list. So if you know that they need representation and they're not in the court system, reach out to the organization now. because if the organization is already representing them and something happens where they are detained, they will represent them during those hearings. It's hard to need them right now and have them be able to be available for the kids. And so there isn't any safeguard, there isn't any special process to help kids. I have seen attorneys, right? You can do what's called friend of the court as an attorney, which basically says, hey, I don't officially represent this person, but I see a need here, right? And I see you're questioning a 5-year-old, you know, can you give me 5-10 minutes so that I can talk to the child and see whether they're even understanding what's happening? So, us attorneys have seen when we see that happen, we try to step in. We can't just automatically say we're going to represent this person because we don't know the circumstances. And so we try to come in as friends of the court and do an evaluation and then try to call organizations and say, hey, like, here's what's happening, you know? But a lot of the kids that come either unaccompanied or with one parent do qualify for that special immigrant visa.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Claudia. And I went ahead and dropped in Kind's link, Kids in Need of Defense, in the chat. So I hope that that helps a little bit, Carolina. And again, I know that we're at 7 o'clock, but if you guys have any questions or if you guys are okay with us going a little bit over, feel free to stay. Claudia is here to stay. We have a few more questions. So feel free to continue dropping in your questions in the chat. But thank you so much for sticking through. Just a few more questions. Um, is there a list, and this kind of touches on an answer that you already provided, but is there a list of detention centers that people can find, and are people allowed to visit, and what are the rights of those families to come visit them?
There is a list of ICE detention centers. There is a list at ice.gov, and then ICE, if you Google ICE locator, that also comes up and you can put your family members' information and it'll tell you exactly where they are. Now, because immigration is federal, even if they are detained in LA, processed in LA, when it comes to finding a bed for them, it can be anywhere in the country. Okay. And now we're having some of the detention centers where you can do video visits. All video visits are recorded and monitored, so you don't want to talk about details. All of the centers have their own visiting rules. For example, Adelanto, it depends on where their bunk is, and then it'll say, okay, bunk B low is going to be on Tuesdays from 4 to 6. And then they'll have a limit as to how many people can come. Usually it's 3. And if you are going to visit and they have an attorney, just let your attorney know, because if your attorney is there at the same time, they count your attorney as one of the people. But if you are there first and 3 of you go in, an attorney can still come in because they can't deny an attorney visit unless they're in lockdown or there's some kind of outbreak. But, just communicate with your attorney so that if you are all going to go at the same time, that your attorney comes after you so that the 3 people that can see him do. Otherwise, one of you is going to have to wait outside. And they do have phone calls. Now, I know there's a couple of detention centers that have iPads and they're able to text message family. Those are monitored and recorded as well. When you're visiting them, it's out in the public. So you won't be able to talk to them about the case, but you will be able to see them. You can add money for them to make phone calls, to buy food, things like that. Every detention center has different rules on that, but once you find them on the ICE locator, it'll tell you what the detention center is. You click on it and it'll give you the rules for that detention center. All the detention centers have ICE presence. So if the family member who is going to go visit is undocumented, they are at risk. And so you want to have at least one person. You don't have to prove that they're your family. It's just, I'm here to visit so and so. And as long as that person is not saying, I don't want to see you, they'll bring them out. Right. So if you can't see them, then somebody else can go in your place and you can do video visits. Okay. But yeah, they do allow it. There are a couple of detention centers that are considered maximum security. Um, those are going to be no contact. There is a glass and the telephone, kind of like what we see in the movies, the old school payphone thing. It's kind of like that. Um, you can't always bring stuff to them during these visits. That depends on the center. Most of them say no because they're afraid you're going to bring something that's contraband. I had a client's mom who took a rosary and the client accepted it and then was penalized for it. So I wouldn't recommend taking anything. It's better to deposit some money for them to buy whatever has already been, okayed by the detention center to be there.
Got
So I
it.
would be careful with that. But yeah, you can definitely visit them.
Perfect. And that I think that kind of answers Rosanna's question. Can we send phone cards to certain detention centers, for instance, if my company would like to donate phone cards or other necessities?
The phone cards, the way they used to be done is that somebody would go visit and just give them the number and people would write it down. But now it's all electronic. And so you would have to know the person's A number and booking number in order to do it. The way I would do that is probably hooking up with a nonprofit that does detention work because when they go in, they're going to see 5 to 10 different people. They're going to interview and then they'll have the information for all of those individuals and then they can deposit into their account. I think that would be the easiest way. And you know that they're in need because they're getting pro bono representation.
Right.
Uh, And so, that I think that's the people who would need it the most.
Got it. Thank you. One of the last questions. Oh, she said clothes same way or nonprofits?
So they get prison clothes. They don't have their regular clothes. Once they're processed and they are assigned a bed, they will take their property
Mhm.
and put it in a bag and put it away. And then they're given prison garments. Now they can buy extra sweaters and things like that, but we can't send it to them. It's not like regular prison where you can send care packages.
Right. Got it.
Mhm.
Thank you. Um, for if in case we are caught in a moment where we see an arrest happening or kidnapping happening, what should people be documenting and what would be helpful in court if, say, that footage is helpful to the person that's being detained, or if you're a citizen and you see yourself being getting detained, like what should people be documenting in that moment?
So, first, ask the person their first name only. Don't ask them for their country of birth, their first name only, a name of a family member, and if they know a phone number, right? Those are the first things that I would attempt to get from this person. Once you have that, as many recordings as possible, but then make sure the recordings get to the family member. Because I feel like there's so many recordings and they're all over social media, but we need to get them to the right people. And so, even if it's 2 or 3 people who are like, we're all going to reach out to the family member, make sure that either they're sending them to you, airdropping them, or emailing them to you so that you can give that to the family. Now, in those moments, we don't always remember, right? But if we hold the phone sideways, it's easier to see once we put it on the projector in court versus if it's just the standing, right? So it's not that it won't be admitted, it's just that it's harder to see. So I would say make sure if you're recording to hold your phone sideways. You want to, if they have a license plate, the license plate, the vehicle, what is the vehicle, how many officers, you want to get people's names and numbers because they're all witnesses. And all of that can be used in order to suppress the information the officer got in that moment and not be used against the person who's being detained. Um, I think the other thing is if they are not masked, make sure you get their faces, because we will call them in to testify. And it also lets us do like a background check on to see if there was any complaints against this particular officer to lower their credibility. Um, there's there's good value in somebody telling stuff to the officers, right? Because we have the right to scream and yell and show our disgust with everything that's happening. But I think we need at least one person whose cell phone recording isn't yelling because it's distracting. Um, I also think that where they are, right? The time of day, was it raining? Was it not? Was it cloudy? What were the people wearing? As much detail as possible. And that's going to help with evidence. Now, if you yourself want to be somebody who testifies, the National Lawyers Guild has a legal observer training, and they give you a specific green hat so that the officers, actual officers, will see that you're not trying to stop, you're just there to record. But then that means you do not interact with those officers at all. You are an objective bystander watching and documenting things. And in the training, they will also go through and say, here's what you need to document. And legal observers have come to court to testify before. So if you want to do that, I would highly recommend doing the training so that you're prepared. But those are basics of what you can, even without the training, do.
Got it. Thank you. I think Rosanna had a follow-up to her original question for the things in terms of the phone cards, clothes. Um, would that also be applicable to prison detention centers, non-prison detention centers?
Yes. So you might be actually able to send it when it's an actual prison because they have a system to check. They already have all of that in place. And the officers who are checking that are trained officers, where in the detention centers, like if you go to Adelanto, a lot of the people that are walking around, they're not officers. They look like security guards. And so they don't have the same training when it comes to checking if there's any contraband and stuff. And so they will flat out say no in regular detention centers. If it's a prison, you might actually be able to send a care package.
Got it. Perfect. All right, this is our last question. And if Carolina, Josefina, Rosanna, if you have any additional questions, feel free to drop it in. But I will be dropping in Claudia's contact, her Instagram and her LinkedIn. So if you guys want to reach out to her, get in touch with her, she'll be available to answer any of your questions. But if you know someone who has been detained, how best can you help them while they're in detention?
So that's hard to answer because you have to have a little bit of knowledge as to what category they fall under, right? If you know that they have a deportation order, the best way to help them is to move as quickly as possible, right? To call different attorneys, who's the first available, just so that we can get them out of the category of they're taking them out now versus we've got some, couple of weeks to figure out what to do. If you don't know, I would say assume and act like they do, right? So other than being support to the family and seeing if there is a way to get an attorney, it's going to be very difficult. Um, one way to lend your skills is if you are computer savvy, because a lot of the detention cases are now electronic filing. And so you have to Google and find the court and then, put in the A number and stuff to help file. So if somebody doesn't have an attorney, that would be a place where I think a lot of our community would need help. is with the electronic filings. In the electronic filings, there are two ways you have to upload things to the regular case, and then there's like the bond to request for a bond, right? Um, and then they'll assign hearing dates and judges, and then showing up the date of the hearing. If it's in person, you can show up. You have to go through the screening. You have to get there really early, and just showing the judge that there is a support for this person. Um, I think the other place that we need is the women detention centers. Um, because I think there's a lot more going on there. And so I think sometimes we need people to visit, maybe people who are not getting visits, to ask about the conditions. Because there are reports sometimes that there are no sanitary napkins, there are no tampons, and it can get really bad really quickly. But the women's detention center are further out. And so less people will go out. Organizations don't have the resources to send people as far simply because of the time, and they're understaffed as well. So if you have time to volunteer, I think going to the women's detention centers, seeing if there's anybody who wants to visit. Sometimes they'll take walk-ins, sometimes they don't. Or linking up with a nonprofit that helps women. There's I can't think of the name, I'll put it in the email as well. But there are victims of domestic violence that qualify for a very specific process. And so helping them out, I think, would help, because the mental health in all detention centers are horrible. But the women are more isolated. And so if you do have time to drive out to one of them.
Yeah, no, thank you. I mean, now I'm gonna go try to volunteer for one on the weekends because I mean, this kind of would go back to Rosanna's original question, like, would we be able to donate sanitary napkins or tampons to these locations if they don't have enough, or that would probably be
So
uh,
you have to, every detention center is going to be different. And so you'll have to speak with the warden. It's going to be hard to get a hold of the warden, but you can tell them like, hey, we have some donations that, we know you guys don't have a budget, and so we have some donations. I know you guys have to check them. What do you need from me to make this happen? Type of thing. And it helps to like just bring a bunch of coffee, even if it's cheap, from like Starbucks to the warden,
yeah,
so that the
gotta
office,
butter them up a little bit.
yeah.
Okay, good to know. Good to know. Yeah, and I think, I mean, this was honestly like so helpful and resourceful. Thank you so much, Claudia. Like, I'm now inspired in different ways to help out and take action in ways that I beyond what I've already done. But thank you again so much. We're so grateful, and hopefully we'll be doing this again.